whether we should start. What do you think? Might as well start. Might as well start. Okay, we got food and stuff to eat, and so help yourself as we get going. Let me open in a word of prayer. Father God, thank you for the evening. Thank you for the pretty day. Just thanks for blessing us. Thanks for working in the hearts of us, of this group of people, Father God, to come together and meet with each other on Tuesday evening so that we can explore your word and kind of learn what it is that you expect of us. We just thank you for your Torah. We ask that you'd especially bless us tonight as we finish up the book of Genesis and kind of reflect on what we've learned. In Yeshua's name, amen. Yay, here comes some people. One people. Yeah, perfect timing. Perfect timing. Okay, last week we did chapter 48, essentially, and we got into this discussion about the fact that Jacob had essentially adopted his grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And he said, as Reuben and Simeon are to me, so now are Ephraim and Manasseh. So he put Ephraim and Manasseh in place of his first and second born sons. And we talked about the implications of that and kind of what was going on and how that was an interesting thing. Hi. So now we're at the let's see, well, just to kind of finish up where we were, I'm going to read the last verse of chapter 48, and then we'll move into chapter 49. Last two verses, starting in verse 21, it says, Then Israel said to Joseph, I am about to die, but God will be with you and take you back to the land of your fathers. And to you, as one who is over your brothers, I give the ridge of land I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow. So he's giving something special to Joseph, this ridge of land that he took from the Amorites. Now that's, we could go off on that, but I don't know enough about it to do much. Go ahead, John.
I think the word says Shechem. It actually says Shechem.
Yep, it says Shechem. And
moreover, I will give to thee one Shechem.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think that's because Shechem means shoulder or something like that. Okay. But that, well, let's see, we'll find out more about this as we move through Exodus, but they took Joseph's body, his bones, with them when they left, and they buried them in Israel, and they buried him in the city of Shechem. So if that's what this means, then they did that. We'll talk about that. Let's move on to chapter 49, unless somebody has something else they want to talk about. Chapter 49 is, for me, kind of difficult, but let's see what we can get out of it. Maybe we'll get a lot of information and understand it. It's essentially where Jacob is blessing his sons and foretelling what's going to become of them and their descendants. So would someone like to read chapter 49 through verse 28, the first 28 verses of chapter 49? Joy will do that.
Verse 28. Genesis chapter 49. And Jacob called his sons and said, Gather yourselves, and I will tell you what will happen to you in the later days.
Did I owe you that one too, or do you have that one?
Gather yourselves and hear, sons of Jacob. Yea, listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength, my first fruit, and my power. Excellence and dignity and excellence of might. Like boiling water you shall not excel, for you went up to the bed of your father, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Simeon and Levi brothers, their weapons are instruments of violence. Let not my soul come unto their counsel. Let not my spirit be joined to their company. For in their anger they killed a man, and in self-will they lamed an ox. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for It was cruel. I will drive them in Jacob. Excuse me. I will divide them into Jacob, and I will scatter them in Israel. Judah, you are my brothers. Praise you, your hand beyond the neck of your enemies. May the sons of your fathers bow themselves to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. My son, you have risen up from the prey. He stoops as he couches like a lion, and I like a lioness who can roust him. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, the lawmaker from between his feet, until it comes to whom it belongs, and of the obedience of his people to him. Binding his foal to his vine and his donkey's colt to the choice of the vine, he washes his clothes in wine and his covering in the blood of the grapes. His eyes shall be dark from wine and his teeth from milk. Zebulun shall live in the seashore, and he shall have a heaven of ships, and even his brothers beside Sedum. Issachar is a strong donkey, crouching between the sheepfolds, and he saw a resting place that it was good, and the land was pleasant, and he bowed his neck to the bear, and he became turbulent, a slave. Dan shall judge his people, one of the tribes of Israel. Let Dan be the serpent on the way, and a horned snake on the path that bites the horses' heels, and his rider falls backwards. I have waited for you, Yeshua. Gad, an army, shall attack him, and he shall overcome on their heel. Out of the Asher, his bread shall be fat, and he shall give a king's delicacies. Naphtali is a deer let loose, given one's beautiful answer. Joseph is a fruitful son by a spring. His daughters run over the wall. And the masters of the arrows harass him and shoot, and the archer lurks him. His bow abides in strength in his hands. His arms are made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from the shepherd, the rock of Israel. From the God of your father may he help you, and may the Almighty bless you with blessings of heaven from above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath the blessings of the breasts of the womb. The blessings of your father are above blessings from all my offspring. To limit of everlasting hills may they be for the head of Joseph, and for the crown of the one separated of his brothers. Benjamin in a wolf that tears. In the morning he devours the prey, and the evening he divides the spoils. All these were the tribes of Israel, 210, and this is what their father spoke to them. He blessed them, each one with what was according to his blessings. He blessed them.
Okay, thanks. Now you can see why this is a difficult thing to go through, but I'm sure we can get some stuff. Sometimes when you go through this stuff, I'm amazed that, that I find as much as I do. So I bet you we can do that. But let's go back to the beginning. Chapter 49, the very beginning. Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob, listen to your father Israel." And then he starts with Reuben. "Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel, for you went up into your father's bed onto my couch and defiled it." Okay, who can tell me what that event is referring to, what that is talking about? Andrew. Some of these are pretty easy, like this one's not too hard. Some of them not so much so.
So isn't he the one who ended up doing something with his father's bride or wife or
Yep. It was one of the concubines, one of the
one of the concubines? That's it.
second tier wives. I think it was Bilhah was who he went to bed with. He went and slept with Bilhah. And I don't remember
Yeah.
whether Bilhah was Rachel's maid or whether it was Leah's maid. I think it was Rachel's maid. Yeah.
It wasn't
and-
his business to be doing.
Well,
either
obviously
way.
not.
Yeah.
Obviously not. And needless to say, Jacob remembered it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that this goes back to the whole firstborn issue, which is that, double portion usually goes to the firstborn or the eldest of both the covenant wife as well as the father. So, interestingly enough, I mean, we see that he's still saying, you are my strength, the first fruit of my manhood, which I thought was interesting because I usually hear that referring to the eldest or the one who gets the double portion is my strength. That's why they get double portion in part,
Yeah.
is that it is his father's strength.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we're seeing here that he's saying, you're my strength. And so I was curious if you can, one of the reasons why I wanted the mic on this is to ask the question, is there anything to that? I mean,
Well-
is it just that, this is my firstborn and my strength or whatever? Is there,
Well, no, I think if it were a perfect world, Jacob would have loved Leah as much as he loved Rachel, and Leah, you remember, was blessed by God by being able to have babies pretty regularly, whereas Rachel was not, and so the first baby born to the family of Jacob and his 4 wives was Reuben. So again, in a perfect world, Reuben would have been the firstborn. Reuben would have been the leader of the family. There are 2 issues that kept that from happening. One was the fact that Jacob made it no secret that Leah was not his favored wife, I think. This is just me talking. And the other was Reuben's own character that allowed him to, want to and go to bed with his father's concubine. So between the 2 of them, Reuben wasn't destined for his so-called natural position.
Right, but we see that Yaakov, or Israel, he blesses the sons of Joseph first before he even gets to this point. So he's already, by this point, blessed the sons of Joseph, being Ephraim and Manasseh. And the curiosity, I guess, was why is he saying, though, that Reuben is a strength if he's blessed and placed the covenant blessing upon the other 2? So,
Okay, there's 2 things here. First of all, the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh may not have happened in the presence of the other brothers. And I can say that because he spends quite a bit of time blessing Joseph in this section. Okay, so I think that might have been a codicil to the will, or whatever you say, a subroutine, and they may not have known about it. And like you said, Reuben is the firstborn. I mean, that's the deal. John?
Well, it could have been, it would have been, we have no reason to believe that it wouldn't have been him that got the firstborn, but he blew it. It was his to blow.
Yeah.
His to lose.
Yep. Like I say, his
the fact
character
that they're-
disqualified him.
Well, right. So the fact that Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh were blessed before then, that was well after the fact of Reuben's fall from the grace of his father.
Yeah.
Right?
Reuben had already done the deed many years ago earlier. Okay. We don't have, I understand your point too, and I don't have a good answer really. Let's move on to, unless somebody else wants to say anything else about Reuben.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The very first verse says, "And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days."
Uh-huh.
Now, I don't know if you have any strong feelings on that, but
Well, let's talk about that, because as a matter of fact, there was something I had neglected to bring up. Does anybody remember where Reuben's territory ended up? It's in the northeast,
on the east-
in the
east-
northeast corner, up the Golan Heights, if you will. His territory is called Gilead. It's actually across into the area of Jordan. His territory is the first territory ever to be attacked by the Assyrians, because he's right up there, sticking out into the middle of Assyria. So in terms of the way history unfolded, Reuben would have been the first to go. Okay?
well, that's not. I'm talking about the latter days applies to all.
I understand.
Okay, I don't know where you're going with it.
Where I was going, I've already been. I'm done. What do you have?
Well, you know, someone like a Stephen Collins or something who wrote a book on the lost tribes. People have different opinions about it. The logic behind it is, if this is the latter days, if he's talking about the latter days, and we're in or near the latter days, the theory is, could you project the blessings that are laid out here into people's in the time we're in now?
Okay, so
Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, if I understand you right, this is an interesting argument. So, based on this blessing and what we might be able to infer from it, can we see some group of people that has essentially fulfilled this and assume, therefore, that they're the descendants of Reuben? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, not just Reuben. It's the whole chapter. The
All
latter
of them.
days is applying not just to
Yeah.
Reuben. It's
Well,
the whole
latter
chapter.
days.
I mean, that's what
Here.
that's
Yeah.
what the Steve Collins and
Yep. Well,
would
that's
go by.
it's
I'm
okay.
not. It's not like I'm
Promoting it.
married to the
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
It's interesting, but
The problem is it's just almost impossible to figure out where these bloodlines have gone. You know, that's the real difficulty with it. And you know, well, I don't want to go too far. Pauline.
The name Bilhah means faltering and bashful. And it's interesting that what happened between them is a little more than just an encounter. He became one with someone who was faltering and bashful. And when they, I'm remembering the incident where they took Joseph and threw him into the well, and the brothers wanted to kill him. But Reuben, in his heart, said, you know, when nobody's looking, I'm going to let him out and I'm going to take him back to Dad.
That's right.
Because
That's right.
he didn't have the courage to stand up to his brothers and say, you know what, guys, this is wrong.
Yeah.
I'm the older brother. We're not doing it.
Yeah.
So
But he knew what was right and didn't want to be a part of it.
He knew
but
what
he
was
couldn't,
right
He didn't
and
feel
didn't-
strong enough to stop it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But he had a kindness towards his younger brother,
Sure.
Joseph, even
Sure.
though he was annoying.
Yeah.
So, but we're going to see that in the last days. They're going to be people who, for whatever reason, they're too shy and bashful and faltering to stand up and do the right thing, you know, out in the front.
Yeah, that's fair
So
point.
they'll be unstable as water, you know.
Okay.
Sometimes they'll be firm, and other times they'll be, you know, vacillating back and forth.
Yep. Yep.
So,
That's good. I can see that. Do you have something, Andrew?
It's a question based on an inception of the question before. What do you consider the last days? I'm just throwing it out there.
Well-
From what point in time would you say the last days? We know that Yeshua spoke of the last days. Okay, beginning of the millennial kingdom. Okay. Okay. In a man's reign. Okay, gotcha. So the reason I ask is there's, you know, as we get past Reuben, which I assume we will here.
Maybe eventually.
Yeah, someday, right? We're going to get to a point where we're seeing some of this. It seems like a lot of this is actually happening or it has happened. Judah, arguably, the what's being spoken over Judah has happened.
Well, we'll talk about it when we get there.
Yeah, exactly.
But I agree with
you know,
that.
I'm saying as a whole picture here.
Yep.
I mean, I you know, we'll go into specifics, but as a whole picture here, it seems like a lot of it's already happened or will happen, or a lot of it's happening in front of our eyes,
Yep.
which we'll see down toward verse 22, etc.
Yeah.
But you know, and then the flow of this is interesting to me because he wraps it all up with Benjamin, which is interesting to me because he's got all these, you know, we normally learn about how we want to end on a good note with something. He goes, good, bad again. You know, I thought that was really funny. But
Well, Benjamin, of course, the main reason he's the last one is because he's the youngest.
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
That's a really good point because I don't remember any orders. I don't know anybody's
Well,
birthday, so I forget.
this is pretty much in birth order.
Okay, so it's birth order.
Yeah.
And that's why he used Joseph instead of Joseph's two sons in
Yeah.
there.
Well, that, yeah.
Because we see that flip-flopping a lot in this, right? We
Oh,
see
yeah.
that, well, it's his two sons, which are Joseph. But
Yeah.
then we see Joseph instead of his two sons, but that's okay because the sons are him, and it's interchangeable to some degree, but it's both of them, not any one of them.
Okay.
And so I find that interesting that they did that. So that's cool. I like that idea.
Okay. Well, let's go on to Simeon and Levi. Those are sons number 2 and 3. So, starting in verse 5, Simeon and Levi are brothers, and their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council, let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury, so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Okay, this one, again, is not terrible. What do we know about Simeon and Levi that might fit this description? Beg your pardon? I say you have to give
When they
her.
avenged their sister?
Yeah, you're talking about the defilement of Dinah. Yeah. If we go back and rethink or reread that story, it was these two. It was Levi and Simeon that were the most upset about what happened to Dinah at Shechem. And of course, it didn't hurt any that they were her older brothers, right, from the same mother. So this was particularly family issue for them. And so they're the ones that primarily concocted this idea about, telling the Shechem, the ruler of Shechem, that if he would have all his males circumcised, then they could intermarry and join forces. And then while they were all in pain, Levi and Simeon are the ones that led the group in there to kill everybody. Now, I think they all participated, but these guys were the ones that ramrodded it all. John?
So what famous Levite, what other famous Levite killed a man?
Well, that's an interesting point. What'd you say?
Moshe.
Well, that's a good one. I was thinking of Pinchas, but that's all right too.
Who killed a man that Jacob wouldn't have been proud of? Let's put it that way.
Okay, yeah.
He would have been proud of Pinchas, I'm sure.
Okay. That's good. That's good. So this discussion, their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. To me, that speaks of the way they brought about this plan. If you remember back to the story of Dinah and when they were out there and this son of Shechem was saying, I'll do anything you want, just give me her for my wife. And it didn't seem like it didn't seem like the whole family got together and decided how to approach this. It was these guys that suggested, okay, here's what we'll do. If you'll have all your males circumcised, we'll do this. And Jacob was just kind of along for the ride. Now, you can't really prove that from the text, but it kind of seems that way. And I think that might be what he's talking about there when he says, let me not enter their council, let me not join their assembly. Yeah.
So he says, let me not into the council. I could kind of see that with Simeon, but again, Levi will eventually become the priest.
Fair point.
Quite a contrast from this, wouldn't you say?
Well, yes and no, because the thing that's interesting about this is he basically says, I'm not too happy with these guys, but then in terms of what's going to happen to them, he says, I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel.
Well, that I understand, and
That happened.
Simeon got consumed basically by Judah.
Yep.
And Levi for sure never had any land to begin with. But
Yep.
my point is, he doesn't want he's saying, I don't want it their council, yet they're the class that becomes the priest.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Andrew's got a couple things.
Two of them.
I was just going to say, it is interesting that it says, as you just mentioned, I will disperse them in Jacob, scatter them in Israel. And there is part of the northern kingdom that did come back after Judah came back. So we know like the Samaritan woman. I mean, there were people of the northern kingdom that lived in Samaria. And here he says, I'm going to put this tribe or these two tribes in both. I'm going to scatter them both. I'm not going to send them just in one. I'm going to put them in both places.
Yep.
So it makes you wonder, are these two tribes the ones that were there at that time of Yeshua and just before?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, to connect the dots there, in the ensuing history, Levi, by being chosen as the priestly tribe, was scattered throughout the entire nation. So there were Levites all over the place. Levites weren't just primarily in the southern nation. They didn't have a territorial inheritance. And then as far as Reuben is concerned, we could go to the specifics reference if you want, but it talks about Reuben's territorial inheritance lay completely within Judah's. So it's like having a country in the middle of a country surrounding it. It was only a matter of time before that kind of got munged together and the lines got indistinct. Pauline, I'm sorry, Andrew's got the microphone. We'll let him go first and then you can go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say really quickly, during the time of Yeshua, where were the Levites?
Well,
So the majority of them should have been in Jerusalem with the temple. Majority. Not
Yeah.
necessarily, all of them, obviously. They would have been throughout the nation and shared by the nation. But
some of them were in Jerusalem, but of course the Levites at the time of Yeshua had been infiltrated by tons and tons of non-Levites.
Pharisees.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So their duties were assumed by those not in authority by God necessarily to do those jobs.
Yeah, yeah.
So the Levites essentially fulfilled this to some degree by, ending their scattering, as it
Yeah,
were,
yeah.
with John the Baptist.
Yep, here.
And so we know we have people still tracking their lineage back to Aharon, and we have Levites, Kohanim. You all right?
Yep.
You see, anybody here know somebody named Cohen?
Yep.
I mean, it's there. But regardless, the tribe as a whole tend to, at that point in time, it was pretty much at its end as a powerful tribe of its own. So it's coming. Hopefully, we'll see it reemerge. But as of right now, it seems like that's kind of like the final break. There was that kind of point in time. It seems like.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. Pauline had something, John. John?
I got one more down here.
Well, wait, she was next, though. Yep.
The name Simeon means hearing and obedient. So it's interesting that in the latter days, hearing and obedience will be scattered among God's people. And faith comes by hearing.
That's good. That's good.
And hearing the word
boy,
of
that's what
God.
we're seeing, isn't it? Yep.
I think Mark's got something on Simeon.
So in line with what we talked about, Simeon being scattered in both the place that Judah was and the northern kingdom. So do we know a Simon in the New Testament that was from the northern kingdom, from Samaria, who drew a sword and took someone's ear off?
Simon Peter. Yeah.
I build a church on this.
Yeah. There you go. So anyway, these first three sons don't get the most glowing fortunes, if you will, talked about them. So let's move on to the fourth one, verse 8 through 12. Judah gets a bunch, right? And we'll have some fun with this one. It says, starting in verse 8, Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, O Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares to rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. Some of that I can get, some of it I haven't a clue about, so this will be kind of interesting. What do you think about the references here to Judah?
Well, I would think that a lot of his people didn't. It just starts off saying they will praise him.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the word Judah means praise.
Right. No,
Yeah.
I know that, but it's just he seems to have gotten the short end of the stick throughout a lot of history that I don't know if Judah would go, yeah, I agree with
Didn't
that.
have to be,
They
huh?
would-
Well, if his brothers, says your father's sons, which is a funny way of saying your brothers,
Nope.
will bow down to you. That's,
Maybe they'll praise him in the latter. Maybe he's talking about in the context of the latter
that
days.
That could be. But he did get the rulership, right? Because David and Solomon were of the tribe of Judah, right? Go ahead.
All right. So
All
we're
right.
going to talk about when till Shechem comes.
Oh, yeah.
So if we read this, as
Says-
soon as this prophecy was done, Judah didn't tell the rest of his brothers and say, "Okay, you heard the old man. I'm the king."
You guys got to follow me. Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
That didn't happen.
No, that did not happen.
It didn't happen for a long time until, like you said,
Yeah.
David, or actually after Benjamin, which is kind of strange because he's from, or not Benjamin, but Saul. but
Saul
he
was
is
from Benjamin, yeah. Mhm.
Right. But then it starts talking about, Shiloh cometh, and to him shall gathering of the people. Who's going to unite the two tribes, or the two houses?
Or all
The
12
Messiah.
tribes.
Well, that's very messianic.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it says, until Shiloh comes. So when that happens, these kings, like we started off with David, I would argue, don't apply anymore. We're the kings. We're the sovereigns. Or we have the capacity to be the sovereigns. Because Yahweh, we went back to the way it was before when Yahweh was the king. There is no king on the earth like what they wanted in 1 Samuel chapter 8. Does that make sense?
In a way. So what you're saying is, now what happened historically was they ended up with kings from the tribe of Judah who reigned over the only time in Israel's history when it was a united kingdom.
Well, even beyond then, they were still. They probably still had kings in the northern tribes.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is the only time in history that the nation of Israel, all 12 tribes were united under one king, was with David and Solomon.
Well, they were all united. Technically, they were all united under Yahweh, who was their first king.
Well, that's my point.
Okay.
My point is the whole idea of king is not God's.
The whole idea of
The whole idea of having a king over the nation is not God. It's not what God wanted
not
them
God's
to do.
plan,
Yeah,
right.
it was not God's plan.
Right.
So what he's saying here is what happened. He's not saying this is what I'd like to happen.
Right. No, he's prophesying what's going to happen in 1 Samuel chapter 8. But then it's my whole point is, it has a timeout date. It stops when the Messiah comes. He fixes that problem and allows us to go back to the way it was before 1 Samuel chapter 8, back at Mount Sinai.
Okay.
One of the things that God promised Abraham was that kings would come from his loins.
Yep.
So it may have, the timing of having the king was what the nation wanted versus the timing when God wanted was different.
That's fair.
So
Yeah,
that's
I
one
guess-
possibility.
Yeah, I struggle with this whole thing about kings anyway, because like I say, as John pointed out in 1 Samuel chapter 8, God makes it real clear that he wants to be their king. But they weren't going to have it. And so I view all the earthly kings that Israel had as God's second best plan. But that's just me. Yeah, that's fair. That's good. Mark.
So would we be correct in stating and affirming what we were saying in the beginning of reading through this chapter was he was telling him, I will tell you what will happen in the end days. As a matter of fact, that word means at the end.
At the end,
The
okay.
end of days. So the Hebrew word means end. So if that's the case, then these events that are unfolding for these brothers are events, even though I was using Peter there, that really disqualifies because that's really not in the end of days.
None of this has happened yet, is what you're thinking.
However,
Yeah.
keeping that mindset, it's interesting that he says, Judah, your brothers will bow down to you in the end of days.
Yep.
And to Judah will be the obedience of the nations. Very interesting.
Yeah, that clearly hasn't happened.
So that brings me very well to the thing I was going to ask about. My translation, verse 10 says, the scepter will not pass from Yehuda, nor the ruler's staff from between his legs, until he comes to whom obedience belongs. And it is he whom the people will obey. And obedience is in brackets, in braces in this one. And interestingly, she mentions Shimon means obedience, yeah?
You mean to hear, yeah?
To hear?
To hear.
To hear and obey, though, right?
Well,
Is it an imply obey? Maybe it's implied?
it probably. There's probably a better word for just obedience, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay. Well, I was just curious because it was, it's almost like because he could have said this a number of other ways.
Yeah.
But the way he said this was very unique because, like he pointed out earlier, Shimon ended up being absorbed into Judah. Yehuda took him and basically absorbed him. So it's interesting that, I don't know, that would happen. When did that happen? Is there like an actual like time frame that we can specify that this happened?
What, did Simeon?
The absorption of Simeon into
Well,
Yehuda?
no, it happened sometime between the book of Joshua and the book of 2 Samuel.
Okay, so somewhere in there, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Pauline has something else.
There's a legend, I'm not sure if it's true. If you study in the book of the Exodus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, you're going to find that the tribe of Simeon is listed as a pretty large number at the beginning, but then after the golden calf incident, their numbers drastically reduce, and it's more than 3,000 people. So there's a legend that states that because one of the Levites killed one of the Simeon princes or one of the Simeon leaders because of his participation in idolatry and the revelry, that the tribe opted to leave the camp. And a huge number of them left. But that's according to legend.
Yeah, it could
you
be.
can do the math,
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean anything.
yeah. Well, you know, a lot
It's
of
a possibility.
there's a lot of things like that about the numbers that are kind of iffy because
Yeah.
we talk about the mixed multitude that left Egypt and how it was more than just the Israelites, if you will. So I'm sure there was a lot of messing around and moving across borders by individuals and families. The lines weren't real tightly drawn. Yeah.
Well, Pincus, the Levite, or Kohanim actually, more
Yeah.
precisely, killed the Simeonite. So that part wasn't legend. That's in the.
Yeah, that's
in the
true.
Torah.
That's true.
But the idea that they decided to leave, we're doing our own exodus.
Yeah. So I got one for you. Has anybody got a clue about washing his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes, and his eyes darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk? What on earth is that about? I don't know. So,
That'd be the last thing you'd wash it in, wouldn't it?
yeah, no kidding.
I was reading ahead a little bit on perhaps an interpretation of that, but it doesn't make sense that wine was considered a rarity and then used at special occasions and sacraments and such, that if, being that he washed his clothes in wine, is that it was a continuation of the blessing.
Okay.
And,
Well, that kind of fits. How about the milk? Any thought about that?
I would think it would be the same
Okay.
in the sense that he was adorned with wine and milk being.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. But what I sense, don't take this wrong, is we're kind of grasping at straws because I haven't really a clue. That's not bad, but it's better than mine, which is nothing. I get nothing,
So I'll throw a couple things out there, just
Think about.
something to think about. So from verse 9 going down, you could make argument that the references to Yeshua are all over it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he says here, the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the staff between his feet until Shiloh comes. to him, meaning even though it's not capitalized him, to him Yeshua will be the obedience of the peoples. We do know that he tied a foal and rode a donkey. The scripture says that when he returns, he's going to have garments stained with blood as though it's with like wine. And so some of these references could be argued that it's referring to Yeshua since he's from the tribe of Judah.
Well, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Salvation comes from Judah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. Okay, so now we get to the really easy ones, right? Verse 13, Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend toward Sidon. I purposely didn't put the map up. Sidon is a city in Lebanon that's on the Mediterranean coast. And reading this, you might think that Zebulun will end up there on that Lebanese coast. It's not what the map says. The map has Zebulun down there and kind of landlocked between the Sea of Galilee and the Mediterranean. It's, I think it's Asher that's on this coast. So I don't understand that either. But again, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Going back to what John was saying, maybe the reason for the confusion is the fact that it hasn't happened yet. We're not in the end times quite yet.
Or they hadn't been scattered yet. He doesn't talk about them being scattered.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
So it doesn't need to be, oh, I see what you're saying. Where the place that they're talking about is close to Israel or in Israel.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Well, Sidon is a well-known place.
After Jesus had his trial in the wilderness, he went back to Nazareth, and they kicked him out of the city, and he went to Capernaum, and that was the traditional homelands of Zebulun and Naphtali, and it was prophesied that the light would come first to those tribes.
Okay. Yeah, I believe that. That's exactly where we are in Matthew, is studying that. Yeah.
Doesn't he go, right, and referring to Isaiah 9?
Anything else about Zebulun? We can go on. Issachar is a raw-boned, this is verse 14. Issachar is a raw-boned donkey lying between two saddlebags. When he sees how good his resting place and how pleasant his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor. It's 2 verses, but again, I don't get much out of it. Issachar's land is over there near the Sea of Galilee. This between two saddlebags, I've got a footnote that says between two campfires. Some people think it means between two hills, between two mountains. Does anybody have any, like I say, I don't have a lot to talk about that one.
There's a famous prophecy about Issachar. Like, go to him, he knows. He knows the answer, or something like that.
Well, there's a tradition. You
Right.
talk about traditions.
You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't know that one. That the tradition is that the Zebulunites became sea merchants who supported Issachar in their Torah studies. But that sounds like a very rabbinic tradition to me. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Pauline might have something.
The sons of Issachar were given special understanding, and I have a friend. Her name was Fran Fisher, and she taught the body temple. And from what she studied, Issachar represents in the human body. Issachar represents the bones, which are the laws and principles. So there's an association with keeping the laws and the principles of God gives you understanding and stability.
Okay, that would go along with the Torah study. They were supposed to be good students of the Torah. Yeah.
1 Chronicles 12:32. This is interesting because I'm having problems with this chapter. In
What's the name of the book?
1 Chronicles chapter
Okay.
12, verse 32.
Uh-huh.
And the children of Issachar, which were men that had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do, the heads of them were 200, and their brethren were at their commandment. That's interesting.
That is, yeah.
1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32.
It basically says it backs up this idea of them being well read in the scriptures and having understanding from it. Okay, we're going to move on. Verse 16, Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels, so that the rider tumbles backwards. So, does anybody know what the name Dan means? He will judge. Don't judge me, I don't know. He will judge is what it means, right? So, when it says Dan will provide justice for his people, it's like a lot of these, it starts off as a play on the person's name. So, Dan will judge. Does anybody know anybody famous that was of the tribe of Dan? Samson. Samson was a Danite. And you can, some of this, Samson saved the nation of Israel by fighting with the Philistines, and basically, what I guess as the story goes, he kind of sacrificed his own life to be able to save Israel. I beg your pardon? Yep, during the time of the judges, yeah. Anybody else know anything about Dan and anything that this prophecy might, and the horse tumbling backward and all that? The only thing I get along that is the viper along the path. I don't understand that, except other than the fact the serpent and the viper, to me, recall images of the adversary. So, but that doesn't seem to make sense. So I'm not sure what that means. Okay, now this one I like, verse 18. I look for your deliverance, O Yahweh. So I don't know why that's there necessarily. So I get a little frustrated about this point because I wish I had more to say, you know. Any other thoughts? We can move on and look at, yeah, Pauline.
Where are we going?
Pauline.
Stephen Jones says that about Dan the serpent. He says that a serpent in the way who bites the horse's heels and causes the rider to be thrown to the ground. This prophesies that Jesus is the solution to Dan overthrowing the horse and rider. The Hebrew word for horse is S-U-S, sus. So Jesus is literally God's horse, named because the horse is the symbol of salvation and deliverance.
Okay.
So Dan may be a prophecy that Christ will bring justice.
Yeah, okay.
The word for serpent is nakash,
Nakash.
like the one in the garden.
We're going to move on, verse 19.
I got another one here.
I'm sorry, Pat.
Okay.
Go for it.
I'm just wondering if there could be a connection between Genesis 3:15, that the serpent would bruise the heel.
Yep. Well, that struck me too, because, you know, I've always, whenever I read that thing in Genesis 3:15, it talks about you will bruise his head and he will bruise your heel, or whatever it is. And I always thought, why'd they pick a heel? You know, what's that got to do with anything? And we see the same thing here, bites the horse's heel. So,
Well, again, the word, it's the same Hebrew word, nakash. And the heel, I mean, I think of Jacob when I think of the heel,
do you?
which is really, the covenant is to the sons of Israel, the sons of Jacob.
Yep. So there's all kinds of little arrows that point around, but for me, the connections need to be a little stronger, because I just can kind of go from one idea to the next, and they don't connect very well. So we're moving on. Verse 19. Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels. Again, we got the heels. So what characteristic of the Gadites might be described in verse 19? You know of any famous Gadites? Well, I'll tell you one thing about the Gadites is the tribes that wanted to stay on the east side of the Jordan River. You remember, we haven't gotten there yet, but when in Deuteronomy, I guess it's actually the end of Numbers, they were all camped out on the plains of Moab, and they were getting ready to cross the Jordan River, and the tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh go to Moses and they say, you know, we're happy here. This is nice looking stuff. Why don't you guys go ahead and do that over there and we'll just stay here? And Moses got real upset with them and says, no, you're not doing that. We're all going to go across and conquer Canaan, and you're going too. And so what they agreed to do is they said, okay, fine, our men will go over there, but all the women can stay on this side, and you know, we'll just, this will be our inheritance. We'll go over and make sure everything is conquered, and then whenever we're done, we'll come back here. And Moses, after talking to God, says, okay, that's what we can do. And the Gadites were valiant in their efforts to make sure that the rest of the Israelites were successful in conquering Canaan. And you can read about that in the book of Joshua. So the Gadites were known to be good warriors.
So
Does it, go ahead.
it's, you know, in the King James it just says, he shall overcome at the last, but it's interesting, yours says the heel, because that's the Hebrew word.
Yeah?
Now we're back to the serpent
The serpent again.
getting squished by the heel
Yeah.
in the previous verse.
We can go study all this out. Maybe there's some light that needs to go on, but it hasn't gone on for me yet. Tradition has it that Elijah was a Gadite. I don't think you can prove that. Okay, now we get to some real good ones. These next two are some of my favorites because I don't get a thing out of them. Asher's, starting in verse 20, Asher's food will be rich, and he will provide delicacies fit for a king. And Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. Does anybody have any idea?
Asher is the happy tribe,
Asher's a happy tribe because that's what Asher means.
full
right?
of comedians.
Yeah, full of comedians. They did, and according, it's pretty hard to back away from the fact that it says point blank, the food will be rich and they'll provide delicacies fit for a king. So evidently they live in a productive region of Israel and are quite into food. And they did end up living up in the northern part of Israel where it's quite productive up there. It's the good farmland without a doubt. No, but I don't know what about Naphtali being a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. I'm sorry, I don't see anything in there. Does anybody have any thought about that?
They're the beautiful people.
So I have two ideas that have been suggested. One's that produce grown in Naphtali's region ripens quickly, and the other is that warriors from this tribe are swift and nimble. That's supported by Judges chapter 4. Neither one of those do a lot for me, but that's something. Yeah. I beg your pardon? No, we've already done Asher. Yeah. Why? Did something come up to you, Charlie?
Reading about Asher?
Yeah, it says, Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal delicacies, what do they call it?
Delicacies, yeah. Yeah. That's why I say he's going to make pastries fit for a king, is what that kind of says. Yeah. John.
So, you know, one solution might be to compare this with what Moses says about the prophecies.
Yep, because
Because
Moses does the same thing.
similar thing in
Yeah, or
Deuteronomy.
similar thing, yeah. So there's a lot of places to look. I've read books on this, but I got to say, none of them kind of open up something where I felt to myself, oh, well, that explains everything.
Right.
Because it's still cryptic. But God does that. I mean, you know, He doesn't you got to want to do this. You know, I enjoy doing this, even though it feels a little uncomfortable not to have good answers. But I know that one day we will. One day we will have the good answers. Did you have anything you just... Yep.
Say Naphtali, in my version, Naphtali is a deer let loose giving one beautiful answers.
Lancers.
Answers like to
Oh.
questions or to wisdom. And,
Well, now that's not bad.
and in the footnotes it was saying that Naphtali is like a swift deer who was known for his eloquence in speech.
Okay. Okay, so if I knew any more about a famous Naphtali, I might be able to... Naphthalite? Might be able to figure that out, but that's Naphtalian. Okay, now we get to one that we can do something with, though. Verse 22. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility, but his bow remained steady, his strong arms stayed limber because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the deep that lies below, blessings of the breast and the womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. Well, now, if there's one that's positive, boy, that's got to be it. Mark has something. There ought to be several things we can get out of that one.
So I don't know what your versions say in these first 22 and 23, but in the Hebrew, it says Joseph is a fruitful son. Ben.
Okay?
A fruitful Ben by a spring. Its daughters run over a wall. The word here for branches is bat,
Bat,
which is
daughter.
daughters.
Yeah.
And then 23 says the archers, but it's actually Baali. What's Baali?
I don't know. What?
Husbands.
Husband. Oh, yeah, okay.
Masters.
Okay.
So what husband bitterly attacked him? He's the
Oh.
one that came against us,
Well, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
scattered us and chased
Yep,
us to the
that's
ends
right.
of the earth.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. And shot at him with hostility. Yeah. I like that. Did you have something, John?
No, what verse is that where it talks about he was a son? Was that 23?
22 and 23.
22. No, I was just looking it up. Yep.
One of the things it does is it clearly gives credit to God as being the one who protected Joseph, right? It says, the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God, who helps you, because of the Almighty, who blesses you. So it makes very clear that Joseph's destiny is because of God, you know. And when it talked about the blessings of the heaven above, the blessings of the deep that lies below, blessings of the breast and the womb, that's very similar to the blessings that Isaac used to bless Jacob when Jacob stole the blessing from Esau. Remember when he went in and pretended to be Esau, and Isaac gave him the blessings. The blessing talked about blessings of the ground and blessings of the sky and all this kind of stuff. So that's similar. I thought it was kind of interesting when you figure that Jacob is now doing what Isaac did to him. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph and on the brow of the prince among his brothers. So Joseph just gets a clean bill of health and a clear indication that God's going to be with him and bless him. That's all I can get out of that, but it's plenty. Anybody else have any thoughts about that one? Andrew?
I guess I have a question.
I bet.
Is he prophesying, or does he have some authority to declare these things?
Well, it says at the beginning of the chapter that, verse 1, then Jacob called his sons and said, gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. Okay, so that would be
But
prophecy.
he doesn't say, so saith the Lord, so saith the God of Israel.
No, but
He-
let me
you
go
know what
on.
I mean? Yeah.
That says, I'll tell you what's going to happen to you. But then over here, he's blessing him. So the difference is, what's the difference between a blessing and a prophecy? Might be your question. Because this is a blessing for Joseph.
Right, but he's also, it seems like he's also laying out the curse to some of his siblings, maybe a little bit.
Yeah,
And saying, look, this is the
Yeah.
price you'll pay through your descendants, through your seed.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because he doesn't make any mention of what happened to descendants of Joseph later.
Well,
but,
not
You know what I
really.
mean? So it's almost like he's commending this into existence. He's saying, look, I am the seed of Abraham, and because of my blessing, I'm declaring this over you.
Yeah.
To some degree, and because of that, Yah, I like to say that we can do whatever we want, and God obliges us to let us screw things up or to do well by Him.
Yeah, to a large degree.
For somewhat, and I'm wondering, does he get a little bit more flexibility here because he's Jacob? I don't know, but
Well,
so that's where kind of the question comes in, I guess.
Okay.
Can he say, look, I want you to have these blessings, but I want them to have this blessing / curse or whatever is going on with them, and God will oblige that? I don't know
Well,
if that can be taken from this at all.
I understand your point, and it's kind of a knife edge because he's clearly not telling God what he should do. On the other hand, he's clearly, I think all he's really doing is saying, this is what God has in store for you. That's what I think he's doing. Yes?
Well, I don't know where any of the other ones had the authority. God told me to tell you this is how you're going to be blessed. So I don't know what you would go by.
Yeah.
But you did bring up an interesting point. I think if you go and look at how many generations was Moses past when this happened? In other words, if you go 3 generations back from Moses, I think you get to Levi.
Yeah.
So what does Yahweh say in Exodus 20, verses 5? If you provoke me to anger, I will curse you to the 3rd and the 4th generation.
Yeah.
So, Jacob maybe could curse him, and maybe that's why they had to stay there that long.
Yeah.
Or that's one reason.
There's something to that.
You guys are stuck here because of what Levi and Simeon did. It's just an idea.
Yeah, no, I think
And
there's something to that.
That's
Yep.
as far as he could go with the curse.
I guess my point wasn't really so much on the bigger picture of if someone has that authority, because it's my belief that we work in authority. That's what we do in our faith. We work in authority. So it's not necessarily if somebody has authority in the kingdom. The question is more of what is he doing here? Is he exercising authority, or is he exercising prophecy, which is speaking on behalf of Yah, right? So a little bit of difference there. The thing is that you can argue that Elijah, was only called to the widow. So what he did, whenever he said, stop the rains, whenever he said, it will only do it whenever I say so, taking authority is what he's doing. So I guess my argument is, my question is just simply of that. It's which side of the coin is it?
Well,
So that's my position, I guess.
That's fine. I view this as mostly prophecy, but I understand your point.
That's fair.
Did you
That's
have
what
something,
Christian-
Pat, you wanted to say?
You have a question?
In verse 22, it says that in the King James, whose branches run over the wall. And I have a note here that implies that might be Gentiles as well as Jews. Is
Sure,
that a
could
possibility?
be. Sure, that's a possibility. Because we run all over the place, right? Yeah. Bat for daughter. Yeah.
What's the word?
It says the branches climbing over the wall is really daughter. But yeah. Go ahead, do you have something else?
Well, I was just, while I have the microphone, noting that what an amazing diversity in these 12. To me, meaning that to Yahweh, there are different characteristics and personalities and assignments and destinies for each. And we have kings, we have rulers, and Asher could be considered a provider, and Naphtali a person with wisdom. It's
Sure.
just on and on and
Yeah,
on.
that's
I
a
just
good
think it's
point.
a very
There are many different parts in the body, so to speak. Another thought that just kind of occurred to me is Jacob essentially had 12 kids. Now, we all know that Jacob had tons and tons of, or he had a nice rank ordering for these kids, right? I mean, he had preferences. But the preferences, in my mind, would go, the kids he had by Rachel, the kids he had by Leah, and the kids he had by Rachel's concubine or maidservant, and the kids he had by Leah's maidservant. That would be his order in his mind. And he had 12 of them. So I bet he didn't even know some of these guys that well. Really. What were you going to say, Mark?
I was just going to say, this last piece on Joseph, if you look at it in the Hebrew, it says basically, and on the crowned head. I know it says crowned head, but on the crowned head of the Nazir, the Nazarite, of the Nazarite brother. So it's basically saying that Joseph is a crowned head Nazarite of the brothers.
That's interesting. Now, Nazir means, I think, separated, doesn't it?
Yes. And here he uses distinguished, but it's set apart.
Yeah. Yeah, it's set apart.
How do you spell it? Nun Zadik Resh? Okay. Well, that's like the Nazarene
Yeah.
with the yud at the end, in the middle of that. That's who we're supposed to be.
We're not quite through,
That's-
so let's finish verse 27. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey. In the evening he divides the plunder. Well, that's a little better than, say, Naphtali, but not a lot. Let's see. Do you know any famous Benjamites?
Shaul.
Well, there's two of them named Saul.
All right.
Right?
Sure.
There's King Saul, the first king of Israel, and then
Pattern
there's
after the
Saul who became Paul. Those are both Benjamites. And both of them kind of had a personality that was like this, in a way. Yeah. Do you know any other Benjamites? This will go. Nope. Esther and Mordecai. Esther and Mordecai were Benjamites too.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
They weren't from Judah, they were from Benjamin.
Yep.
They were the house of Judah, but
Yeah. So, anyway, at least the Benjamites are, they clearly don't figure as prominently as the sons of Joseph and the sons of Judah, but they're
But-
probably up there on the list.
what I observe is, thinking in the two house ways, the house thinking is they've kind of got each a foot in both houses.
Yes. As a matter of fact,
The
that's
glue
it.
that holds it together in a way, or the
Yep.
connection.
That's exactly what I was going to say. My question is, based on these prophecies, which tribe received the right to rule Israel, and which one received the double portion in God's blessing? What do you think? It looks to me like Judah received the right to rule Israel. And it looks to me like Joseph
So
received.
why were you talking that in context of Benjamin? I don't understand.
Well, no, I was just talking about all of them in general. I was not talking about in the context of Benjamin. We got more questions back there.
So another question, because I'm trying to be more inquisitive than declarative. I don't see anything here. I mean, I guess from a cultural perspective, where we're trying to avoid violence and everything's bad if it's violent, and this paints a pretty violent picture of Benjamin to some degree. The overall picture in my mind seems somewhat violent, but
Ravenous wolf sounds violent. Yeah.
yeah, pretty violent, and dividing the spoil, etc. But is this necessarily a curse?
Well, I don't think so.
It's just defining an aspect of a character
Sure.
to some degree.
Sure.
So if I may, I'm sorry. I guess the only thing I would say is between Benjamin and Yehuda, which, as we know, did not fall off the wagon. They remain married to Yah in what we can see. So if that's the case, then they wouldn't he probably wouldn't have a whole lot to declare against him, because him and Yehuda are supposed to rule, or I say rule, well, I guess they both ruled at some point or another, the southern kingdom.
They kind of become one.
Yeah.
But before you
They
go
act-
too
they act
far,
unified.
Before you go too far down that path,
Uh-huh.
I was reading Jeremiah chapter 3, and it talks in there. It talks in there about God giving the northern kingdom of Israel the divorce. But he goes on at some length to say, but your sister, Judah, was worse than you are. She's terrible, and on
But
about
didn't
how
get
bad that
divorced.
was. But he didn't get divorced.
She got corrected.
I guess
Heeded to correction too.
I
which
guess
is the
my
big thing.
point is that the only real difference between Judah and Benjamin and Israel and the rest of them is that God dispersed, quote, divorced the northern kingdom, and he didn't the southern kingdom.
Right.
They're both
so
equally
so
guilty.
the whole lump got taken away,
Yeah.
as it were, which included Joseph here. So that's why I was kind of curious if you would define what was spoken over Benjamin as necessarily an evil or a blessing, either or. It was just.
I wouldn't.
Okay.
I think it's just neutral.
Okay.
And it says on the very last verse, you guys can tell you a second, the very last verse of this chapter, verse 28. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving each the blessing appropriate to him. Okay, Mark.
Well, to answer the question of Benjamin, it is a curse because they almost get wiped out.
Well, that's okay. Well.
So it's interesting that, you're talking about Benjamin here being ravenous and fierce. Who were the two great generals that were pretty valiant and mighty warriors in Saul and David's army? Abner and Joab,
Yeah, that'd be the ones.
both Benjamites.
They were. I didn't know
because
that.
Saul instituted them from the tribe of Benjamin.
Okay.
And when it talks about the mighty men of valor, the men that were mighty warriors, several of these men were Benjamites.
Okay, that's good to know.
So you want them on our side? Is that what you're saying?
Pauline has her hand up here. You guys are hogging the mic back there. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll do this one last one, but it does require some assistance from Mark.
Okay.
So you and I talked about, Mark, some of the signs of the standards over the camps of these different tribes around the tabernacle. And are some of these, because we see Yehuda as a lion cub.
Yeah.
Well, their standard was the lion.
Yeah. And Benjamin's was a wolf.
And Benjamin was a wolf. So now we're seeing the development, or at least, this is the fun part, right? This is essentially where Jacob is saying, that's you in the stars, that's you in the stars, that's all of these being declared in the heavens, and so that it might be on earth as well. And therefore, because that's you, this is what it declares over you. And somewhat, so that's kind of an interesting thing that we see,
bet it
because
is. You bet
because
it
this
is.
does occur under certain. We see all of these things, including Joseph to some degree, and I think one of the points that was made around his translation versus mine is that mine says that. And remind me what yours says maybe, but mine says is a fruitful plant. I think it says fruitful son in yours, but mine says fruitful plant. Did he Yeah, he's still over there.
Mine says vine.
Vine, see, there you go. And a fruitful plant by a spring with branches climbing over the wall. And isn't it interesting that we're dealing with two branches right now that are trying to they're coming back to finding water and stuff. So that's an interesting, this is why I say we're seeing this kind of developing before our eyes as this prophecy, because we can look to that as a promise.
Yeah.
So.
Pauline?
Talking too loud.
When Benjamin was born, Rachel named him Ben-Ami, which is son of my sorrow. And Jacob came and named the child
Son of my right hand.
son of my right hand. And that points to Jesus' two works. The first was to come as the suffering servant, and then the second was to come as the victor.
Okay, great.
So, thinking about the wolf, the famous prophecy of the lion will lie down not with the lamb, but with the calf, and the wolf will lie down with the lamb.
That's interesting.
So, I don't know.
Pat's got something.
The second ones are the animals of sacrifice, right? Well, the lion, the wolf and the lamb, obviously.
Well, even though Benjamin is considered a ravenous wolf, if you study about wolves, they're really a very family-oriented,
That's true.
gentle
Yep.
animal. And it says here that at night they shall divide the spoil. They're not greedy, selfish, just mean, like Simeon and Levi might have been, just
Yep.
for the fun of it.
That's fair.
They have a purpose in their
They're, yeah.
job.
Yep. Ravenous only means hungry. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Did you have something, Joy? You're left-handed. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm just going to say the ravenous meaning could be hungry, but also is that how he, like in the morning it says that he devours, and at night he divides up the spoils. It's like he's going out and hunting and being a good provider,
Yeah. Yeah.
basically.
It doesn't have to be negative. Yeah, I agree. Beg pardon?
You might have a follow-up.
But the one where it says Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. Oh, where is it? Here, let her have the microphone. Interesting point about Benjamites. Judges.
Judges 20:15. And the children of Benjamin were numbered at that time out of the cities 26,000 men that drew sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, which were numbered 700 chosen men. Among all of the people there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at a hair's breadth and not miss.
They're all left-handed. That's very interesting. Yeah. Well, I committed us to finishing the book of Genesis, so we're going to do it. Okay? So we're on chapter 49, verse 29. I'm going to read for a little bit, and we'll talk about it, okay? Starting in verse 29 then. This is Jacob. Then he gave them these instructions. I'm about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite along with the field. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Joseph threw himself upon his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians mourned over him 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, "If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me and tell him, my father made me swear an oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father, and then I will return." And Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear to do." So Joseph went up to bury his father. All Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court and all the dignitaries of Egypt, besides all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers and those belonging to his father's household. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very large company. When they reached the threshing floor of Arad near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly. And there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Arad, they said, "The Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning." And that is why that place near Jordan is called Abel Mitzrayim, which means the mourning of Israel, of Egypt. So Jacob's sons did as he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which Abraham had bought as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite, along with the field. And after burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt together with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father. Okay, so let's talk about that just for a couple of minutes. Why do you think the Egyptians mourned Jacob's death? Well, that's a possibility. They might have been because they were told. Why do you think? I mean,
He's the father of Joseph, the viceroy, the savior of the whole world.
Joseph's a pretty darn popular guy. He's pretty well liked around that place. And this was his father. And they probably all knew the story. And so they were, I think it was like today when some important dignitary in some country dies, all kinds of people from different countries go to the funeral, right? They go over there. So I think it was that. I think it was nothing more than that. What argument did Pharaoh or did Joseph use to help gain Pharaoh's permission to go to Canaan to bury Jacob?
Why are you talking about this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you said it's because
He made an oath.
he made an oath. But that's kind of, I mean, I would like to think he asked him, and he gave him the ability to do it because he had great respect for him.
Yeah,
Not just, well, I'm sorry, I got to go, I got this oath, that sounds kind of trickery to me.
Okay.
I mean,
okay. I can see what you're saying.
That's the way it turns out in the scripture, but
Well, the only reason I think that it's got some significance is because we just read a couple weeks ago about Jacob making Joseph take that oath.
that's true. That's
So
fair.
they thought it was an important enough.
What's Joseph going to say? No, I don't want. I got to go check with Pharaoh first.
Yeah. Joseph took the oath. So it's notwithstanding that certainly Pharaoh
You're
had the
right,
power
you're
to
right.
say, that's not that important. I think you can stay here. Send all your brothers. I mean, he could have done that. Anyway, be that as it may, I think it's important to kind of look at the nuances of what's going on here.
Well,
Because Pharaoh, he goes to Pharaoh's, first of all, he doesn't go to Pharaoh. He goes to the others, the people that are in Pharaoh's court. And he says, go to Pharaoh for me and ask him. I think it's indicative of his position with Pharaoh. And then, of course, Pharaoh treats him like a son. Pharaoh says, sure, of course you can, And they gave him the full-bodied 40-day embalming process that they did in Egypt, and all the Egyptians had a mourning period. They probably had the flag at half-mast and all this kinds of stuff. So it was a big deal. But who went to Canaan to bury him? Bunch of Egyptians.
Apparently, whoever it was looked Egyptian because the Canaanites said it's an Egyptian.
Look at all these Egyptians,
mourning.
yeah. A bunch of Egyptians, Joseph and all his family, and all the rest of the family went. Who didn't go? The children and the flocks and the herds. Now that's I think it's interesting it tells us that. And why? Insurance. Yeah, I don't think there was ever much doubt, but on the other hand, you know, it was really clear from a lot of different standpoints they were coming back.
And teaches the children to man up by working in the field. So,
Okay, fine.
no, I was going to say the reason why I raised my hand was because I thought it was interesting they embalmed him
Yep,
and spent the allotted amount of time embalming him,
yep,
which is actually prescribed by the customs of the pharaohs. He received essentially a pharaoh's burial,
yes, he did.
which is unusual. Even a rich man doesn't receive a pharaoh's burial.
Yep,
The richest of men didn't. You had to be essentially a god on earth to them to receive such a burial, because the idea was that the afterlife would carry you on to contend with the underworld and all this other stuff
Hey,
on behalf of Israel, of Mitzrayim. So
they probably did that out of respect for Joseph.
maybe, but and that may be the case. But another argument could be made that because of the recognition that their God had received amongst the Egyptians at the time,
Yep,
knowing better than to do anything less than a proper burial. Because what is it Mark said? It's a very Hebrew concept to provide for the very best in someone's burial, because that is how you honor someone the most, is in their burial, right? And they're taking down. So he was a recipient of honor more so than Joseph. I mean, do we have any record of Joseph's passing?
oh yeah.
What was it?
We're coming right here.
Getting ready to go down there?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
no, yeah, just hang on.
Okay,
We'll get right
I'll
to
hang
it.
on then.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Okay. Okay. Enough said about this. Like I said, I want to make sure and get it all through this. So after they get down there and they bury Jacob and they do all the necessary mourning and messing around, they come back. And I'm going to start here in chapter 50, verse 15 and finish. Well, at least go to at least a few verses here. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph, saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs that they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him and said, "We are your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I'll provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. So, why do you suppose this passage is even here? Why did his brothers do this?
Well, they showed lack of faith that he would. They didn't believe him, I guess, or they were so, I don't know, they were so guilt-ridden still
Yeah.
that they didn't have the confidence that Joseph
You know,
wouldn't retaliate.
I've thought about it, and one of the what I've kind of come to the conclusion of is they looked within themselves and they said, maybe not consciously, but they said, if I had to go through what I put Joseph through, there's no way I would forgive him. That's where they were. So they basically could not imagine that Joseph could forgive them.
Or they're reflecting their own values.
Yeah, they're
Their
reflecting
own-
their own values and their own lack
Faith.
of faith, as you might say. Yeah, I think this is very interesting. And Joseph had clearly, he's done with it. He put it away. You know, it's done deal. That's why he wept. He says, "Come on, you guys, give it a break. I'm not going to hold you. I'm not waiting until Dad dies and then I'll take you out and have your heads chopped off. It's okay." Pat's got something, John.
To me, it's an indication that the scripture is a laver or a mirror of what we are like.
Yep. It's also an indication that I'll put this is probably the wrong way to put it, but Joseph had a much better understanding of the workings of God and the way God dealt with people than his brothers did. His brothers still didn't quite get it. Any other thoughts there? Okay, like I say, I'm bound and determined to finish, so I'm going to read the last few verses. Starting in verse 22. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. Also the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. So there's a couple of things I want to point out. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Is this Machir mentioned again? Or?
Yeah, Machir. That's exactly one of the things I was going to talk about. It said,
well, I talked in earlier about the three generations that, connecting it to Exodus, you'll have a curse to the third or the fourth generation. So, in essence, there is a connection between Genesis and Exodus.
Yeah, that's fine.
If he's one of the ones that goes in the Exodus, that's what I was asking. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the reason I read interesting thing about this, children of Machir. Machir is the son of Manasseh, so they would be grandsons of Joseph. Okay? And Joseph, they were placed on Joseph's knees. And you remember when Jacob adopted Ephraim and Manasseh? He says, these sons will be my sons. Other sons you have, they can be yours, but these sons will be my sons. And so Joseph was adopting these sons of Machir. So that's a good one.
Where is Machir also mentioned somewhere else, you said?
Oh, it's all over the place. And all through the Torah,
oh, okay.
Machir is mentioned as one of the sons of Manasseh. I guess I'm done, but I wanted to leave you with a final thought. Joseph on his deathbed says, you're not staying here, right? He says, God will come and take you up out of here. So one of the things that I was reflecting on and I read about, so I can't call it original, God promised Abraham three things. He promised, let's see if I get this right. He promised descendants, right? He promised a lineage. And he promised a relationship. He said, I'll be with you. And those that bless you will be blessed, and those that curse you will be cursed. So he promised descendants, a relationship, and he promised land. The land on which you're now standing, that'll be yours and your descendants after you. So the descendants, the relationship, and the land that's what God's promise is. The book of Genesis is about the descendants. The book of Exodus and Leviticus is about the relationship, and the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy is about the land. I thought that was kind of interesting. So now that we've done this, and I know y'all want to go home, but does anybody have any kind of thoughts about the sum total of looking at Genesis? I mean, what do you think about Genesis? Good.
Well, I think the focus of the Torah is kind of like the Exodus and all that. And I mean, the majority of it is about that generation. And so the Genesis is, who are the people that do the Exodus?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Where'd they come from?
Yeah, who are these guys?
Yeah, who are these guys?
Just a sidebar. I looked up Machir, and it means sold. That's interesting.
That's interesting. There's two things I think are interesting about Genesis. One is, it was written by Moses. Okay? So he didn't know any of these people, right? This is all written handed down by words of mouth, and Moses wrote it. That's one thing. And the other thing is the Torah is law. There isn't a lot of law in Genesis, but there's tons of stories. And the stories tell you all kinds of things about God, about how he deals with human beings and what he expects of people. So it's teaching and instruction. It just happens to be in a form that's not law, in terms of, like thou shalt and thou shalt not. Okay,
It's law, but it's in story form.
there you go.
You have to
Yeah, it's
decode
like
it.
the comic book version. Do you have something you want to say?
I might have to leave it there. I don't know. I was going to say I kind of disagree. I think Torah instructions are drawn out in action. So when we look at later, we'll see what to do, what not to do, and how to do it, and how not to do it. But we
But-
see it in execution here,
yeah.
and we see the curses that are promised if you don't do it right, executed here.
Yeah, yeah.
We see the very nature of the Torah in place.
Okay, I'll buy that.
And,
I'll buy
and
that.
that's the thing is it's a familiarity with the Torah and execution, not just the listing of them. So,
Well, the thing about just listing the do's and the don'ts is you don't get the whys, right?
Well, Yeshua
shows
said,
you-
"Before
this
you were
shows
my-"
you the whys.
kinda before, but Yeshua says, "I used to call you servants, for you did not know the master's will, but now you are my friends, for I've revealed these things to you." Paraphrasing, of course. I'm horrible with verbatim, but that's what he says, and so there's, to some degree, you're right. There is a lack of why, but we see it played out nonetheless.
Well, no, I meant, okay,
Sorry.
we're in agreement, except that I meant that whenever they tell you do this, don't do that, you don't have, that's the letter of the law, that's not the spirit of the law. The stories give you the spirit of the law.